So as a leader, we need to build an environment of honesty, integrity, and representing ourselves truly, authentically. And start off with a leader doing that. Do it in small drips and drabs. I wouldn't start off by saying, I got to tell you about my life story and all the things I messed up in my life. Here I am. But we may actually get there over time.
This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hey folks, it's Gordon. So glad you've joined us for the podcast. And if this is your first time listening, glad you tuned in. And if you're coming back for more, glad you're here. Hope you'll take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. So over the next few weeks, we've got a few special encore episodes that we're doing. It just in celebration of 350 episodes that we've had so far. It's hard to believe the growth that I've had with this podcast since I started it in 2017. So I really appreciate the fact that you're listening, and figured we'd go back and pull up some of the things from our archives that we knew were just good episodes and some great people to hear from. So I hope you enjoy over the next few weeks these encore episodes of the podcast. And also would love for you to go over to the website, practiceoftherapy.com, and check out all the resources and things that we have there for you and helping you and growing your practice. So stay tuned, folks, for this encore episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast. You know, when starting a private practice as a therapist, counselor, or life coach, things can feel a bit overwhelming. You're unsure where to start, what to focus on, or how to grow things. I've been in private practice now for over 18 years, and a lot has changed. I've helped countless clinicians avoid a lot of the common pitfalls and build successful practices that align with their values and lifestyle. My coaching and consulting services are all about giving you a focused plan, helping you set clear priorities, and understand exactly where to invest your time, energy, and money. We'll work on defining your niche and then how to market it, ensuring that you build a practice that's both impactful and enjoyable. I'll also teach you the business skills they don't cover in grad school, from financial planning to implementing systems that make your practice run smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. In addition, I can help you find ways to diversify your income streams and create financial stability for long-term growth. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your practice to the next level, I'm here to guide you in every step of the way. Let's work together to turn your vision into a thriving, fulfilling reality. To apply and find out more, just go to practiceoftherapy.com/coaching and consulting. That's practiceoftherapy.com/coaching and consulting. And also you can book a free 15-minute discovery call with me to talk about your goals and vision. I look forward to hearing from you.
Hey there, I'm Aaron Potratz.
And I'm Nathan Hawkins. If you don't know us yet, we're the hosts of the Shrink Think podcast, which bridges the gap between therapists and clients.
The Shrink Think podcast is proudly part of the Psychcraft podcast network, focused on helping people live more meaningful and productive lives.
Join us every Wednesday in our engaging, informative conversations and lighthearted humor to help you normalize and demystify therapy for those beginning or continuing their mental health journey.
We discuss everything from understanding styles of therapy to addressing conflict with your counselor, learning about attachment styles, and the fear triangle. We seek to run the gamut of topics to pull back the curtain and empower effective therapy.
If you haven't listened yet, you can find us at shrinkthink.com/podcast and discover other resources, including educational videos and fun swag at our swag shop.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because TherapyNotes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving. Equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Happy to have back with me today Mike Michalowicz. Welcome, Mike.
Gordon, it's always a joy to see you. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, and so for folks that are listening to this podcast, if you've been listening a while, his name comes up a lot, just a whole lot. And if you don't know about Mike Michalowicz, you need to, because I will say, Mike, that your book, Profit First, which you're probably best known for,
yes,
was just a total life changer for me and my practice and hundreds of other therapists out there. And it's just been, as we were talking about the evolution of kind of how Mike and I met, which we can talk about that later. But Mike is an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur behind a $3 million companies. Let me say that right.
Yeah, it's a tongue twister.
Is the author of several books, including Profit First, Clockwork, The Pumpkin Plan, and his newest book, All In, which we're going to talk about today. Yeah. And so Mike Michalowicz has been a columnist for the Wall Street Journal and business makeover expert for MSNBC, and he regularly travels the globe and is an entrepreneurial advocate. So I'm glad you're back, Mike. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, let's dig in. We're going to have some fun, I think.
Yes. So let's just start with talking about this new book. And I got to hear Mike speak on this at the Meet You in Kentucky conference with Casey Compton. And Casey, we have a mutual great friendship with Casey, but I was actually looking back at my notes from your talk. And, the one thing that stood out for me is just thinking about how we hire people, because I know that that's a tough thing for a lot of people, and particularly in our industry. And just so go, Mike, tell us about this.
Yeah, that was fun. That was the first time I delivered a traditional or formal speech on All In. And as of today, the book is releasing. It hasn't released yet. It's releasing on January 2nd of 2024. Mm-hmm. How the book came about and some of the concepts that we can dig into is I like to look at what an entrepreneur, myself or any entrepreneur yourself, what we want to achieve as an outcome and what's the common path we use to get there, but what's the data behind the actual results. So just jumping back to Profit First for a second, most entrepreneurs I have interviewed want to experience personal and financial freedom through their business. I'd say it's well in the high 90s those are some of the objectives. So I looked at it and very few people experience personal freedom. We're entrapped in the business. We work like crazy and absolutely don't achieve financial freedom. We're living check by check. So I said, well, how come we want this yet, quote unquote, no one is achieving it? So I look at the data, and with Profit First, I found that the foundational formula or method we follow is we take our sales, we subtract the expenses, and what's left over is profit, but there's never leftovers. Problem with that formula is we're told profit is a leftover. It comes last. And in profit first, I flip the formula. It's sales minus profit equals expenses. So in practice, you take your profit first, hence the title, hide that money and run your business off the remainder. It's the pay yourself first principle applied to business. So when it came to all in, I said, what's the process we use for recruiting and retaining employees and raising the bar for our organization? And first, with recruiting, I noticed that the method we use is interviews. The traditional interviews. There's countless books out there, the great questions to ask and so forth, how to get your A players. So I looked at the results, and the results are abysmal. Less than 10% of the people that we find through interviews end up being great performers for our organization. We make extraordinary numbers of mishires and people who are mismatches, not ideal fits. And we kind of put a square peg in a round hole. So one of the strategies I looked at is, well, if that doesn't work, if that's putting profit last, the equivalent, what's the flip? And I found, and I shared this at the event, is we can do effectively recruiting workshops. I just call them workshops. It's something I discovered is prolific in the sports industry, but hasn't yet been widely applied in the business industry. Some businesses have done this with great success, but I'm trying to expose it to everyone. So just background story. In high school, I played lacrosse, not a big popular sport in the South, and it's not generally a popular sport, but it's growing. And I was a average to average minus athlete, but had the opportunity to go to a camp at a school in the Northeast called Hobart. It was back in the day, pretty famous for lacrosse. And I went there along with 300 to 500 other students. And we're out in the field practicing and training, and the coaches are helping everyone improve. What was happening behind the scenes, and I didn't notice, that some of the athletes were tapped on the shoulder by a coach and saying, hey, you're showing some skills we'd like to help you with even further. Come to this field, and go to that field. And what they were doing is they were identifying the athletes with the most potential, the most desire and thirst, and helping them play and practice at even a more elite level. Well, at the end of the camp, Hobart, the organization, the school, had identified a handful of students who would ultimately become Hobart players. They were the best of the best. But the magic is I got better too. And so did every other athlete there. The workshop process allows everyone to improve, and the people that show the most desire or thirst to become your candidates. So there's an application in business. I think at the event I shared Home Depot and their story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Home Depot's big throughout the US, and I don't know if you've ever been to one of these, but Gordon, you or I could go to a workshop where they're making birdhouses, and you bring a child, or maybe you just go on your own, and you learn this process. Now, there's a multifaceted approach. First of all, they're getting you to the store, so you're more likely to be a consumer. They're giving you a favorable experience, so you're more ingratiated with them. But behind the scenes, there's a couple Home Depot employees that are teaching who are also observing, and they watch for the participation from the parents. Who is helping other parents? Who's the most into this? And they tap those folks on the shoulder and say, hey, you've demonstrated such skill and interest. You ever consider working at Home Depot? It's a great recruiting platform. And this plays out in other businesses too. But what the lesson here is for any business, particularly if you're in the therapy industry, is run workshops. Now, it doesn't need to be a 5-day camp at Hobart. It doesn't need to be a workshop that's hands-on like Home Depot. You could do this virtually. And is there a skill or something that candidates may want to acquire that you could help teach? And just by their attendance and then their demonstration of acquiring that skill, you may pick extraordinary candidates. The last thing I want to share is you don't need to teach the stuff yourself. And so if you could find someone that has expertise in a skill, you could teach that. Make sure you invite people to pay to some degree because they need to participate. We're not looking to have this open class. Whoever wants to show up, shows up. They need to have some small investment to be vested in it. And lastly is, and my favorite part is, this isn't something you run on Indeed now. It's not like, you run an ad that almost no one responds to. Now you can go to your competition and say, listen, we're introducing a new skill. Send your therapist our way and cherry pick that way. You can go to workshops that already exist. You can go to adult education classes. And I got a lot on this, but my final tip is, if you're not ready to run the workshop, just go to a class where people are being trained on the people you want to that for what you want to recruit. Go there as a student, but really as an observer. And now you don't even have to put on the workshop. You can find the perfect people that you want to bring on board.
Right. Well, the thing that strikes me about this is that it also takes the pressure off the people. You really get to see people acting more like their real self, so to speak. Yeah, in an atmosphere like that. I was just thinking about, and I know we've thrown this idea around before at the conference, and then just hearing you chat with other people about this. One of the things that has been successful for me in my practice is hiring interns, people that are graduate students. And and those folks are hungry to learn and that sort of thing. And one of the things that's great is that you can really see their people skills rise to the top. I mean, we can teach clinical theory, clinical skills, all of those all the time. But if you don't know how to engage with people, you're not going to make a great therapist. And so you get to observe that firsthand.
Yeah. You shared 3 words. That's the magic bullet: hungry to learn. And that's what we're looking for. There is basically 3 categories of ability that we should be looking for. And sadly, most businesses only look for 1, maybe 2, and they are the small factors. Factor 1 is what's called experiential ability. Experiential ability is something you've demonstrated in the past. It's something you can bullet point on your resume. And honestly, that's where almost all of the consideration goes when a small business is looking to hire someone. And there is some value. If they did in the past, they likely could do it in the future. But there's 2 other components. There is what's called innate ability. Innate ability is my natural wiring. So I may be a high energy person or a low energy person. I may be someone who's introverted or extroverted, cultural fit or not. Some businesses now are looking at those components more diligently, and that's great. They use Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or whatever the tools are out to evaluate that. But those 2 combined only represent 20% of the real opportunity in a candidate. The big one, the big fat one in the middle that almost everyone ignores is potential ability. Potential ability is what could this person do that they haven't proven yet? Now, that sounds so hard to grasp, but it's not. All you have to do is these workshops. When we were at that event together, I was talking about Eddie Van Halen. If you and I started the Gordon and Mike rock band and said, we need a great guitar, and we should do that. You should.
Yeah, we should do that.
We should do that. I'm not singing, and I'm the tambourine, so you got to pick your instrument.
Yeah.
But say we wanted Eddie Van Halen. Well, we couldn't get, I know he's deceased now, but we couldn't get Eddie Van Halen. He would reject us and say, are you kidding me? I got my own band. He wouldn't even take our call. But when Eddie Van Halen was, I think it was 11 or 12, that's when he had initial interest in the guitar. So imagine we went back in time and we approached Eddie Van Halen and said, hey, why don't you come to our workshop? We're teaching guitar skills and would love to have you there. What's the likelihood he'd attend? Pretty high. Now, there's a caveat here. We didn't know Eddie would be Eddie Van Halen back when he was 12 years old. So what we need to do is invite all of these students and say, hey, we have a workshop on guitars, playing guitar better. But what will happen in our workshop is Eddie and the other students will first have curiosity, interest, they show up. But that's not a great candidate. The next level is desire. Desire is where they show interest in learning. They ask questions. They practice longer. They're the ones who show up first and stay last. And then the highest level is thirst. Thirst is where they can't quit it. It's part of them. And it would be very easy to identify desire and thirst with Eddie Van Halen and perhaps other guitarists. And early on, within a few weeks, I think we can identify we have a potential Eddie on our hands and invite him in the band. That's what we're looking to do with our company.
Right. Yeah. And that's, and one of the things too is that I know in hiring therapists, we want to be able to see their ability to interact with people. And you get it firsthand when you do a workshop like that. I mean,
that's right.
Yeah. There was
a case study at University of Chicago. They have a medical center. And what was so interesting about this, and I include it in the all-in book, is they were interviewing in the traditional way. Show us your resume, sit down, be interviewed. And the interviewer felt that she had this specialized skill to identify the best candidates. Well, the university said, we want to approach this in a different way. We don't think we're getting the best candidates. And there's a bigger backstory to that, but they ran a skill shop. And these same candidates that were interviewed went through this process of going to different workstations and going through and demonstrating experience. Like, how do you check in? This was for their administrative department. How do you check in a new patient? Now, here's what's so interesting. They had about 6 workstations. One of the stations was that check-in. And the person running it demonstrated a patient who has cerebral palsy. And she knew this because her roommate had it. And it's very hard to have fine motor skills. So taking out your identification, your driver's license can take up to 60 seconds or a minute. So what they did at this workstation is they had candidates check the person in, and she noticed that many of the candidates, or some of them, were very gracious. Some would say, please take your time. Others would say, may I assist you if you'd like assistance. But one candidate in particular was brutal. She ripped the card out and said, just give it to me. We got to move. And what was so funny, and not in a ha-ha way, but interesting way, was in the interview, that candidate who ripped the driver's license out of the hand was the best interviewer and was going to get the job, but was the worst in the skills assessment. What it ends up is someone that shows confidence and control may speak well, but it doesn't mean they can do the work well. So they ultimately hired the people that had the best skills. The retention rate was their best ever. The performance rate was the best ever. It proved to be a much better model.
Yeah. I know there was an acronym that you came up with, Mike, called FASO.
FASO.
You want to say some more about that?
Yeah, FASO. It rhymes with lasso, and it stands for the 4 key elements for building an all-in team and retaining a team. F stands for fit. So just going through this quickly, as most organizations think a fit is a person to a title, and that's a mistake. It's a talent to a task we need to match. So instead of saying, I need a marketing director, say, what does a marketing director do? Or social media management, or whatever the components are. Write those down and then say, what is the talents I'm looking for to do this? Social media is someone that maybe is very organized. Graphic design work is someone who's very creative, which are very different things. Then we say, who are the candidates, maybe even already in your organization, that can bring their talent to specific tasks? What happens is we break out of that pyramid structure of titles and we go into like a web-like structure of matching talent to task. It builds much thinner, stronger, healthier, leaner, meaner organizations. So that's the fit part. Ability, we talked about with Eddie Van Halen. What we're looking for is potential ability. So I'm not saying disregard experiential ability. I'm just saying it's very insignificant compared to potential. So we need to lean into that potential. Workshops, virtual workshops, attending someone else's class or workshop are all ways to find people with potential. And there is a massive community. People with great ability, potential ability, and otherwise, in some cases, or in many cases, are already gainfully employed, but they don't know what else is out there. So they're not looking in Indeed, they're gainfully employed. Those are people who don't have a job right now, generally. Right. So what we do is now we enter a whole new community of people who are already perhaps gainfully employed, but don't know or don't see a path forward beyond what they're doing now. You can introduce that by leveraging their potential. S stands for safety. We must have a safe environment. And I'm not just saying physical safety. That's mandatory. Imagine at any time someone may come up and hit you in the kneecaps with a metal pipe. Well, I'm going to be on edge all the time. So we need physical safety, but we need relational safety. I need to feel that I can be my true self in front of you, Gordon, and you the same way for me to perform my best. So as a leader, we need to build an environment of honesty, integrity, and representing ourselves truly, authentically. And start off with a leader doing that. Do it in small drips and drabs. I wouldn't start off by saying, I got to tell you about my life story and all the things I messed up in my life. Here I am. But we may actually get there over time. And then the last part, O, stands for ownership. And what I found is many business owners come to me and say, gosh, I wish my employees would act like owners. So I said, okay, how do you do this? Well, you do it by deploying what's called psychological ownership. Psychological ownership is where you feel something is your possession, even though legally it may not be. So the example is, I own a truck, a Ford little pickup truck, and I take care of it. I wash it. I park it, exactly where I want. I make sure it's secure and protected. I get the oil changed, all that stuff. But here's the funny thing is I don't actually legally own it. The bank does. I'm making my installments. One day it will be legally mine, but it's psychologically mine. You don't need to give your employees ownership in your organization. In fact, that can even trigger entitlement, which is dangerous. What we simply need to do is demonstrate you have control over this. I can park the car where I want. You can personalize it. I put my dice on the rearview mirror, and you have intimate knowledge around it, meaning you understand the intricacies of how it works. If we give our employees opportunities to have those three elements, psychological ownership will kick in. Look for the keywords, the buzzwords, when they start saying this is our organization, or this is my job, or this is mine to take care of. All those things, my, mine, ours, all show a sense of ownership.
Right, right. I was listening to another interview that you did, and shout out to Whitney Owens and her podcast. But I love Whitney. One of the things that I thought about is I've just recently read Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is really giving the leaders need to have legitimacy. And the way that they do that is just what you talked about, is giving people the safety and ownership of what they do. And that's so key. I think in my own practice, I think one of the reasons I've been, and knock on wood, that I've been successful in keeping people is that I give them ownership of everything that they do on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, if there's a problem, I want you to figure it out first. Don't come to me with it.
Right. It's yours.
Yeah.
And there's a subtle difference between responsibility and ownership. Responsibility is, I have an expectation for you to do this degree of tasks, and you better comply with it. What I was saying is, if we are forced to comply, we will seek to defy. I'll give an example with a rental car. When I have a rental car, I have a responsibility to return it with a full tank, no scratches, clean interior, and so forth. So what do? The second I go outside the rental agency, I'm doing donuts in the parking lot. I'm jamming on that brake when I get near the traffic light, and I'm flooring it when I take off. And that's because I've been forced to be responsible for certain things, and I'll seek ways outside of those responsibilities to defy it. Mm-hmm. Ownership, it's a subtle difference, but significant. Ownership gives the person control. Take care of this as if it's yours, because it basically is yours. The object becomes a representation of who they are. So when I assign something to someone and say, you own this now, this becomes part of them, integrated with them. Mm-hmm. It's a representation of who they are. And so what we need to do is just drive that point home, saying this is who you are. This is a representation of you, and award them or recognize them accordingly. But by giving them the control, the way they want to get to the outcome that we want is a big part of giving people ownership.
Right. Wow. Well, Mike, I know I've got to be respectful of your time, and we could go on for days talking about these things. But one of the things I'll say, Mike, is that in reading your books, and I've read most everything you put out there, one of the things I'll say is that you break it down into just simple, everyday kind of language that's easy to understand. And like I said at the beginning, when I first read Profit First, it's kind of like it opened up the understanding in a way. And I think what you've done here with All In, and I'm really looking forward to the book coming out, is really think about how we approach hiring people and running our businesses in a way that creates an atmosphere that people are going to will want to work for you. And
exactly. Want to work for you, want to work with you, because your business will be a representation of you collectively. It'll be a representation of them. I'm proud of the book, and I'm so happy you're going to be getting a copy.
Yeah. And so, folks, you're going to hear more from Mike Michalowicz, I'm sure. And it's been such a pleasure to reconnect, Mike, in this. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you and where they can find the book and all of that sort of thing.
Sure. So it's at your favorite, retailer, Amazon or otherwise. But the best way to get started, I would say to go is my website. Now, here's the tip. No one can spell my last name. So Mike Michalowicz, while it's the tip. So here's the shortcut. Go to Mike Motorbike, nickname I was given in grade school, the only PG nickname I've ever had. So if you go to Mike Motorbike, as in the motorcycle, that will bring you to my site. All In, along with my other books, there's free chapter downloads all waiting for you right there. MikeMotorbike.com.
Yeah, and it's great. Your website redesign, I don't know how soon you did it, is great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. It's definitely a different type of website.
Yeah, it is. It's great. And the thing about it is Mike makes all of this fun. And, it's just, I had a friend one time that said, if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. And then Mike just absolutely makes this fun and enjoyable. And so I appreciate you so much.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Oh, and by the way, we'll have all the links to this in the show notes and the show summary so you can access it easily. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this special encore episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Got a lot of great podcast episodes in our whole catalog. I mean, you've got over 350 to choose from now, and I'd invite you to go back and check out some of the older episodes as well that maybe you haven't noticed, and maybe there's some topics of things that you're working on right now that within your practice that might be of help. I would love for you to go over and visit our website at practiceoftherapy.com and check out all the resources we have there and different things coming up. And thanks for joining us. And a big thanks to our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice and just absolutely couldn't work without them. They provide not only a patient portal that's second to none, but also a way for you to do your scheduling, file insurance claims, and create rich documentation without a whole lot of thought you have to put into it. So check it out. Go to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Oh, and be sure and use that promo code Gordon, just GORDON, to try them out for 2 months for free. So be sure and check it out. Thanks again, folks, for joining us for this particular episode. And do take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And we'll be back with you next week for another episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.